Alchemized was not very good. Well, some of it was good, but unfortunately, there were too many glaring problems for me to give it a glowing review as many others have. Today, I'm going to walk you through why I did not like the 2025 book Alchemized by Senlin Yu. Ultimately, I think it was a failure of a book in many ways, and I hope today to demonstrate to you why I think this, with some critical literary analysis of the text. We're going to walk through every beat of this book with a full plot breakdown. I think in order for you to understand where I'm coming from, you need to first understand what the book is trying to say and how it says it. This book is over 1,000 pages, so if you're someone who knows you'll never read this book, this is a perfect opportunity for you to understand more without reading. If you have read the full book, you're welcome to skip forward in the video to the analysis section. Timestamps are in the description below. However, I do encourage you to watch the whole thing because I will be covering some nuances in the writing that I noticed during my read-through that might have been missed during yours. This book does have some trigger warnings, including non-consensual sex, violence, gore, swearing, forced pregnancy, and more. I will be giving you a very censored version of the events, so if you're squeamish or sensitive to these topics, I would proceed with caution, but not worry too much. This will be the most vanilla version of the triggers you can get. Rest assured, knowing your eyes can be saved, but mine unfortunately had to read every word, gore and all. Let's start first with what Alchemized is. Alchemized is a debut novel from author Senlin Yu. Published in 2025, this book was originally a Harry Potter fanfiction published by the author with the same pen name on the website Archive of Our Own. This fic, called Manacled, became very popular, and in 2022, the author began drafting the work into an original fiction story. At first, this was reportedly for the author's own pleasure, but soon enough, Senlin Yu was working with an editor and had a publishing deal for an unknown amount with a big-name publishing house, Del Rey at Penguin Random House for the US and Michael Joseph for the UK. The author says Alchemized is an original work and, quote, Manacled's fundamental plot is what's being maintained, but all of the IP of Harry Potter and The Handmaid's Tale is omitted. We will circle back to this lack of IP. The blurb for Alchemized says, in this riveting dark fantasy debut, a woman with missing memories fights to survive a war-torn world of necromancy and alchemy, and the man tasked with unearthing the deepest secrets of her past. I won't go into Manacled specifically in this video because I never read it, and technically it has been scrubbed from fanfiction sites. The author wants you to disconnect the two works, and I am in a prime situation to do so. As someone in the fanfiction community, but not primarily the Harry Potter community, I first started hearing whisperings of Alchemized last year. I had never read Manacled, but I have consumed plenty of Harry Potter and Fantastic Beasts fanfiction. As a non-binary person myself, I have found it hard to engage with the fandom in a substantial way after JKR's transphobic beliefs have come to light. And while fanfiction does not line a TERF's pocketbooks, I have been slowly moving away from it. After my read of the book, I watched a video about the problem with published fanfiction that I highly encourage you to check out. Ultimately, it is likely that this book and Harry Potter fanfiction in general can and does encourage people to engage with behaviors that do support J.K. Rowling financially, which I found a very compelling argument. This is my reminder in this video to not give JKR any money. Don't watch or stream her content. Don't engage with anything you don't already own in her world. This video by Princess Weeks didn't go into depth on the book itself or why fanfiction as a base for a novel can result in diminished quality, so I hope to go over some of that here. There are a lot of other great videos out there made by marginalized communities that have been hurt by JKR's beliefs that I highly encourage you to watch if you would like to be more informed on the harm that has happened. Taylor Rose is one such example who specifically talks about the cultural and commercial capital that Alchemized is likely giving to Harry Potter. As always, I will link all of these sources in the description below. Anyways, my preferred fanfiction for Harry Potter was not works featuring Hermione, which is the relationship between the characters of Hermione and Draco. That is the titular couple in Manacled. If I read a fic with this pair, they were usually a side couple. I personally prefer the gay or platonic stuff. Harry Potter is a large fandom and there is a lot of content there. And not all of it's happy. While I didn't read Manacled, I have read fanfics with similar premises or similar themes. I have not shied away from consuming darker fanfics, and some of them are quite excellent. So when I heard a fanfiction with these darker themes was published, I was intrigued, even though it was a straight couple. When I heard it was over 1,000 pages, I saw a challenge to myself. I've been trying to read bigger books lately, and this seemed like a great challenge to prove to myself that I could do it. After all, I reread a Harry Potter fanfiction earlier this year that was 500,000 words. How hard could 1,000 pages be? But boy, was I surprised by this book. I was surprised it was published in this state. I was surprised that the Goodreads rating is nearly 5 stars. I was surprised by how I liked a good chunk of the book, but also felt so icky after reading some of it too. I was surprised that even when trying to earnestly consume this as an original work, I was simply unable to disconnect from the IP that it was inspired by. When you are primed by a fandom, you start recognizing little things in writing from that fandom, and this book is roasting in them. Everywhere I looked, there was ghosts of other content. There was a whisper of what this book once was. And it's unfortunate because the writing here was largely not bad. I think the author's prose is very readable, which may be my bias towards fanfiction, but it's true at least for me. I thought some of the sentences were gorgeous to read. Some of the imagery was pretty compelling. But yet I also found giant glaring issues with the anachronisms in the book, the lack of world building, the poor character development, the sometimes clumsy plot. But no need for me to go on and on. We'll go through all of that in the analysis. First, let's walk through the whole book together and get on the same page. I really don't want to leave anything major out of my plot breakdown because I think understanding how the book lays the plot out for you is very important to understand where I'm coming from. So if during my explanation, certain things feel like they're repeating or like we just had that scene, just know it wasn't me. That's genuinely how the book flows sometimes. Also, if it feels like I'm just dumping exposition and world building on you, or omitting the exposition and world building on you, that too is how the book is. And if I'm not including it, it didn't end up being important to the plot. I'm giving you the SparkNotes version. I will not be discussing every paragraph or we will be here forever. If you want that, go listen to like the 30-hour audiobook. If I'm skipping over parts or not including quotes you personally thought were important, just know that I determined they weren't needed for the breakdown or didn't raise any flags to me. That doesn't mean they're not important and that they couldn't have stood out to you. Feel free to share them down in the comments below. As someone who had never read Manacled, I went in blind, not knowing what to expect. And thus, you dear watcher, shall experience that as well. Strap in, grab a tea, grab a coffee, a mulled wine, as this book likes to dole out. Get comfortable as we begin our journey into Alchemised. The book begins with an author's note. It reads, "This is a work of fiction that explores many of the darker aspects of war and survival. Reader discretion is advised. For more details, see the back of the book for more content notes." I discussed earlier about how any triggering content here will be abbreviated in my overview, but it is nice that the author does include this information for the reader. Part 1 begins with a prologue. We are introduced to our protagonist, Helena, who is in a dark space. She's been here for some time and she is waiting, suspended. We learn that she's trapped here, and she may never escape. We learn that there's electricity of some kind, and her limbs are shocked to prevent atrophy. Already, we establish our character as wanting to stay alive. Chapter 1 begins with Helena somehow awaking from stasis. The guards are unsure how it happened. She's knocked out again. We get a conversation from an unknown man and woman talking about Helena and giving us some world building. We learn her full name is Helena Marino, and she was supposed to have been killed. She has instead been in stasis for 14 months. We learn that a war has ended and Helena's side lost. We learn that there's magic in this world called resonance. I will be switching between saying resonance and magic throughout my overview, but know that they only call it resonance in the book. One of the powers is called necromancy, the ability to raise the dead. There are these things called necrothralls or thralls, which are reanimated corpses. We also learn that there's something called vivimancy, described as necromancy's inverse twin, wielded on the living versus the dead. Helena is tortured by this woman because something has been done to Helena's mind, resulting in transmutation barriers in the brain, which is unusual. We learn Helena is foreign from a place called Etras and was an alchemy student. Helena is now around 20 years old. We learn about a leader of the losing side of the war, someone named Luke, or Luce. His family sponsored Helena for her education, and he led the war effort. We learn about liches, also known as the Undying. These are the highest class under the current ruler, known as the High Necromancer. We also get some information about metals, which are very important to this world, as well as a sprinkling about the religious system in this book. Helena has on these manacles that prevent her from using her magic, her resonance. Okay, so that was a lot of world building. Just hold my hand, there's only 2 more chapters like this. We next learn that Helena was a healer. We next learn that Helena was a healer and that everyone who opposed the necromancers is dead. So all of the Order of the Eternal Flame, including Luke. We learn about the High Reeve, whom no one knows the true identity of. We learn the building they're in is called the Alchemy Tower, part of the Educational Alchemy Institute. We meet a doctor character named Stroud, as well as another man named Shizio. The High Necromancer named Moro shows up, and everyone is talking about the block Helena has on her mind. The High Necromancer tries to torture it out of her with some mind magic, and it doesn't work. Helena gets new manacles, which have a piece of metal that goes straight through her wrist. These ones completely block all sense of magic. We also meet a character named Mandel, who is the warden when Helena was taken, and she is accused of betrayal for the memory problem. Mandel is then tortured graphically. There is a metal thing inside of her chest wall, and when it is removed, she dies. She then has another piece of metal put in her and is resurrected. The group theorizes on why Helena's brain would do this, and they come to the conclusion that it may be some form of animancy. The High Necromancer orders them to find out more. Shizio reports something about soul transference and people with animancy being able to use it to go through memories of some kind. The High Necromancy orders that since the High Reeve is an animancer, he will do it. Helena is waiting for the transference to start and is tube fed and given IV fluids. We have a lot of exposition dumping about the building as well as the astrology religious system. We learn that before the war, the Holdfasts were a chosen family that ruled the kingdom of Palladia as rulers called Principate. Luke Holdfast's father, Apollo, was assassinated, which started the war and made him head Principate. We also learn that there is class and race structures in this world, but aren't told much other than that Helena was a scholarship kid and was treated as less than her peers who were from guild families. Luckily, Luke isn't racist, and Luke and Helena were friends during school. Someone Helena knew in the war, a leader of the resistance, shows up named Crother, except he's not Crother, but a dead version of him being animated by another soul, someone who had previously been undying. This is called a lich, or a lich with an E. It's also sometimes capitalized and sometimes not. Helena gets into a car, which really took me out of the story, but okay, cars and electricity and feeding tubes, they all exist in this world that is so behind in other things and has magic, but sure, we use a car. Helena realizes that if she has secrets about the resistance, she cannot let the enemy get them. She considers letting the High Reeve kill her. She arrives at her destination and we meet Kane Farron, the High Reeve. Helena and Kane knew each other during school and were academic rivals, like adjacently. We also meet his wife, Aurelia. They both have iron as their metal residence. Farron is given instructions on how he is supposed to conduct the transference sessions as long as it takes to get the info out of her. Aurelia tells her she's to stay in a specific wing of the house. Okay, so now most of the heavy world building is out of the way. They just really throw it all in the first few chapters. And honestly, you were all spared with my retelling. There are some parts of these first 3 chapters where, I kid you not, nearly a full page is dedicated to exposition dumping. It's very tell, don't show. Our point of view character is Helena, and while sometimes she sees something and is like, this is how it was before the war, sometimes the book just goes on a tangent about the previous systems from before the war. And as a reader, it's hard to buy in because these systems are gone. You lost the war. Things are different now. Sure, some of this influences the context for how we got here and what's different now, and will come in handy later in the book. But I would rather see that in action than get 500 words straight describing a religious system that I don't even know if the author understands. We'll circle back to world building in the analysis, but this is truly egregious for the first few chapters in a very long book. You want your readers to have buy-in, not be overwhelmed by possible inconsequential information. There's also not a solid understanding of the magic system here. New information like the metal affinities keeps coming and doesn't stop coming. Page 1000, you're getting new info. Let me do a compliment sandwich though. Some positives are, the writing is nice when it's not info dumping, it's readable. I was concerned this would be more unedited, so that is nice. Anyways, now we are in Kane Farron's house. Helena begins the chapter by graphically describing how she would kill herself if she could. She explores her new room, opening a door to the hallway and immediately having a panic attack about how dark it is. She gets a delivery, and what does she find but one red dress? I lied. World building isn't over. We find out more about the metal resonances and how the guilds use them, specifically Farron's family. I think this is supposed to be an explanation on why cars exist, but it doesn't make much sense to me. Cars need more than just metal to work. We also learn that this society is apparently not very progressive when it comes to women, often not even sending them to school. Cool. Farron and Kane have their first transference session, with Kane pouring a drink and belittling her. He goes through her mind in a very violent way, but we as the reader don't really see anything of substance described. Farron is clearly unhappy with how it went and orders her out. She leaves the room and is at a banister that looks down several floors. She considers throwing herself down it. Farron sees this and drags her back into the room. He goes through her memories, which is different somehow from transference, I guess. After this, Helena falls very ill. She's kind of hallucinating for a bit, and we find out she has a bad fever. A doctor comes by and says that it's brain inflammation from the transference. The solution is longer bouts of time in between sessions and spending time outdoors. Helena is given a red cloak and Farron takes her to the courtyard. He's reading a newspaper which has publicized Helena's situation and location. It is apparently for a trap in case the resistance wants to come and rescue her, since she is one of the last members of the Order of the Eternal Flame. Helena steals the newspaper to read it fully. We learn it is 1788 and her last memory is of 19 months ago. We learn that Farron was accused of killing Apollo Holdfast. There is also an article about sponsored births, basically a breeding program that boasts food and lodgings and a criminal record expunging. This is also the point in the book where I went, this smells awfully like The Handmaid's Tale. The red dress, the cloak, the sitting in front of a man drinking, the breeding program. And I'm going to be dead ass with you. I did not know that Manacled was also a Handmaid's Tale AU fanfiction. I genuinely had no idea, and we'll discuss the similarities with IP in the analysis, but the fact that I didn't know going in, and then within the first few chapters could see the similarities, is a little concerning. But I digress. Back to the plot. We learn resonance can occur even with people without magic parents. It seems to be some kind of sliding scale. There's also people who are born to two alchemist parents who don't have magic called lapses. Helena has another panic attack in the dark, but Farron sees it and demands answers, and she explains that she was kept in the dark stasis chamber and is traumatized from that. The doctors, Stroud and Mandel, visit again. They decree that monthly transference sessions will be best. Stroud also mentions that Helena was having febrile seizures, which she was not informed of. They also decree that she has a nervous disorder, meaning her panic attacks. Stroud also reveals that she would like Helena in her breeding program. Gross. Helena bites back that she was sterilized. She also reveals that healers are kind of like nuns and they never marry or have children, but she was sterilized specifically because her magic is regarded as corrupt. She has the vivimancy ability. Stroud bites back that the Eternal Flame and the Faithful have long since been able to identify vivimancers in utero and can and do abort babies who have that magic type. Later, Farron comes to Helena's room. He kind of like comes in close to her and she literally thinks he's going to assault her and is horrified. Farron says he has no desire to touch her and that he finds the idea offensive. She asks if he killed Principate Apollo and Farron is honest and said he did because the High Necromancer asked him to. He graphically describes the murder to Helena, which I will spare you from. Helena has this like flashback memory about Luke. We learn that drugs, specifically opium, exist in this world. Luke also confirms that the resistance motto is that good will conquer evil. I wonder where I've heard that before. We also learn about a power Luke has, pyromancy, or the ability to control fire. We also learn that Farron's father, Atreus, has failed the High Necromancer multiple times, which is why he's inhabiting a body with incompatible resonance, Crowther's body, if you remember. There's a fight between Farron and his father, and Farron uses the iron in the house to drag Atreus out. Farron later comes to Helena's room and makes her take a pill. The pill makes her emotions disappear for a few hours. They leave the room, and when they return, there are two dead maids, thralls, cleaning the room. Helena remarks that the necrothralls usually aren't capable of complex tasks and that this is unusual. She asks Farron if he's a homunculus, an artificial human. Farron is like, what? No. Helena wanders the house, appreciating how the drugs make her feel since it's basically like a crazy good antidepressant. When she wakes up the next morning, she is depressed again. Farron does another transference session and Helena gets another fever and has a seizure. She's very out of it and keeps trying to leave, so she is tied to the bed. By the time she's recovered, her limbs have atrophied again. She also gets a pair of boots and gloves for her winter walk, establishing that she will be here for some time. We get another solid page of content about resonance. We learn that there's still a lot of unknown information about how resonance works, and a lot of what's currently is known is largely faith-based. We also learn that 2 millennia ago there was a great disaster, which is interesting because you'll recall the year is 1788, but sure. Farron and Aurelia are throwing a solstice party, and during this party, a man walks into Helena's room named Lancaster. Lancaster insists Helena knows him, but Helena has no memories of this. Helena goes to watch the party and observes Aurelia having an affair with another man. She's horrified because that means Farron will see it in her memories. There's like a New Year's-esque countdown, and when it hits 0, Farron kisses his wife, but his eyes are wide open and he's staring at Helena as he does it. A family is then brought in, a man, a wife, and 3 children, the youngest being around 10 years old. We're told that they are relatives of the eternal flame that didn't turn themselves in, and so they are there to be tortured for entertainment. Farron immediately steps forward and snaps the necks of all 5 of them with his bare hands, citing that executions need to be done quickly and efficiently. Helena also overhears that Aurelia is struggling to give Farron an heir because they're not having sex. Helena is allowed a newspaper and sees that Farron has been executing people as the High Reeve in addition to killing people at the party. She explores the house again and finds a room with an alchemy version of a summoning circle with a cage in the middle. We get no explanation. Farron shows up and they have a little conversation, and Helena mentions Aurelia. Farron basically implies he leaves her to her own devices and doesn't care what she does. We get this awful line that just because Farron and Aurelia had an arranged marriage, Farron is as enslaved as Helena is. This was one of those lines where I generally was like, Helena, what are you talking about, girl? Stand up. You have cuffs on your wrists that block your magic. You can't leave the house. You just saw this man murder a family. That man has violated your mind multiple times, putting your health at risk. But sure, yeah, you're both enslaved. Anyways, Helena goes on a walk and finds the stables. Inside, there's this like monstrous wolf. She also finds a chapel. Inside, we get some lore dumping about the gods of the world, but I will say that at least this lore dumping made sense in the context of the narrative. Helena sees that there's a shrine to Farron's mother, Enid. We also learn how intensely patriarchal the guild families are, viewing women as inferior, and that women who have babies with vivimancy and necromancy are regarded as having poisonous wombs. The next transference session arrives. This time, Helena feels him in her brain and like reacts, pushing him out. She gets sick again from it. Farron and Aurelia go to the city, leaving Helena alone. She learns via newspaper that the rebreeding program is expanding and selecting a specific resident's parentage. Aurelia returns with the affair man, who turns out to be Lancaster. Farron returns and the doctor's visit. Stroud says that Helena is underweight, and Farron learns that she's been being fed table scraps, which he didn't know because Aurelia had arranged the food. Stroud examines her and Helena passes out. When she wakes up, there's a deep bruise near her hip. Helena has another dream where she learns she had trainees at some point and she doesn't remember that. She also remembers something about Soren, Lila's twin brother, but can't remember what happened to him. Lila is a guard for Luke. I don't know if I explained that before now, but that's what she is. Helena's in the kitchen and manages to get a knife. She decides she will kill herself and hides the knife so that she can do it in a locked room. Farron corners her and Helena attacks him with the knife. She ends up holding it to her own throat, but Farron uses his powers to wrench it away. He then wraps his hands around her throat. We have known before this that Farron is undying/immortal, but we see it in action as he heals from a slight wound in minutes. We also learn that an immortal necromancy leader was killed, confirming that they can die. Stroud comes back and drugs Helena to do some procedure. She's sick afterwards, but the High Necromancer wants to see her. They take a car to meet him, and he's on a throne of bodies, and he looks ill. He reveals that Helena is the Eternal Flame's Animancer, which is how she was able to resist some of the mind intrusions. He also says that the Undying had been killed because the weapon was made of obsidian. Morrow, the High Necromancer, tortures Farron for not realizing she was the Animancer and for not finding the assassin that killed the Undying. After, Helena and Farron both have a little bonding moment about being tortured, but like, girl, he kills people. There's this like clumsy reveal at the end of the chapter where Helena is talking out loud about all the things she's realizing about how to take down the High Necromancer, his plan, what's going wrong. And like, yes, she's not in any position to make moves or communicate this to the resistance. But girl, you do not know that Farron is trustworthy. He has proven himself only loyal to the High Necromancer thus far. Why are you telling him this? Anyways, we get confirmation that the repopulation program is a guise to create an animancer for the High Necromancer to use. We have another dream, this time with Shizio, and at this point I was like, who is this guy again? Because this book gives so few character descriptions, it can be very hard to keep track of who anyone is or why they're important. It also will introduce us to characters that are really random when we don't know or care about. When this is done in fanfiction, you get this like little like, hey, I know that guy feeling, but in original fiction, you're like, wait, do I know this guy? It happens a lot in this book. Anyways, dream doesn't really matter. Farron confronts her about how she realized the High Necromancer is dying and that the Undying have been used as a power source, and he confirms this. Time just passes in the blink of an eye. Helena stops fighting the transference. Farron is looking ragged, and Helena realizes that the High Necromancer has been torturing him by killing him over and over. Helena also begins menstruating again, something that hasn't happened to her in years. We get clarification that her sterilization was not a hysterectomy, but a tubal litigation. Aurelia has another party, and Helena overhears some guests talking about assaulting girls and impregnating them at some kind of brothel. This is confirmed to be the breeding program, which turns out to not be nearly as formal as it was painted to be in the newspaper. The guest insinuates that Farron should rape Helena, which Farron denies. Helena walks away from the party, and Lancaster catches her in the hallway. He gropes her and says he wants to rape her and that she was supposed to be his. Helena manages to run, but is caught, and a needle goes into her neck. She passes out. She wakes to Lancaster trying to smuggle her out of the building. Farron catches him and tortures him very graphically. Helena is like grateful, I guess. She says Farron always comes for me, which is not really supported by the narrative at this point. Girl, this is your captor. Farron realizes she's been drugged and takes her back to her room. A thrall comes to clean her at first, but Helena panics and says she doesn't like dead things, so Farron does it. Farron has to leave town. Aurelia comes to see Helena and gives us some lore about the guild families and tells us how her father had 2 of her mother's pregnancies terminated when they didn't show iron resonance in the womb. Aurelia is really mad at Helena that Farron has never shown interest in his own wife, but has in Helena. She also reveals that Eric Lancaster, the person she was having an affair with, was killed publicly by Farron. Aurelia wants to torture Helena for Kane showing more interest in her and for Aurelia being manipulated by Lancaster as a way to get to Helena. She violently attacks Helena, attempting to gouge out her eyes. The house reacts, and iron surrounds both of them, separating the two. Farron shows up and frees Helena. He's horrified and voice is shaking. It's kind of unexplained why he's so upset, because we know he's not squeamish and because he regularly plays with organs to kill people. Helena's eye is severely damaged and not in the socket. Farron tells her that she needs to instruct him on how to fix it since she was a healer. She tells him how to do it, and he very painstakingly does repair her eye. Farron then helps Aurelia out of the iron. He reveals that he controlled the house from a distance, which Helena believes isn't possible. Farron threatens Aurelia with death if she ever touches Helena again. Romantic. Helena remarks that Farron is talented at healing, which just reminds me of something, a little tag that's a little popular. I don't know. Some big trope I've seen somewhere. Anyways, an optician visits and says her eye will recover. Helena now has an eye patch. Stroud visits and confirms that Helena is ready for the repopulation program. Stroud has reversed the tubal litigation with magic. Cool. Now it's revealed that the transference is less important than reproducing an animancer, and they want Helena to do it. Stroud tells Farron all this and says she wants to remove Helena or she can be bred with Farron. She gives them 2 months to get pregnant or Helena will be moved to try with others. Gross. Helena is told by Stroud that if she keeps speaking out of turn, her tongue could be removed. Awesome. She kind of flounders for a bit and runs into Farron, who tells her that in 3 days she will be fertile. He was recently tortured and looked haggard. Helena gets all sympathetic for him in a line that I truly cannot tell if she's being facetious or not. Girl, focus up. He just said he's going to rape you in 3 days. Farron reveals that he is now publicly known as the High Reeve and will be named the High Necromancer's successor soon. Helena asks why he killed Lancaster, and Farron says that Lancaster had endangered his assignment. The next day, Helena acknowledges that what's going to happen is rape. Glad we're on the same page. Helena also has some thoughts about pregnancy, something she had never considered for herself before, hence the sterilization. Farron shows up and we're told now that he has officially been named the successor. Farron tells her she's fertile and Helena tries to get him to kill her. He refuses and orders her to bed. He then rapes her. It is not very graphic, but it is clearly rape. Stroud comes by and does some magic and gives Helena a pill to make her enjoy the rape more. Farron returns and Helena finds she's lustful for him now. She still has like some composure, but she's not in her right mind. He rapes her again, and this time her body reacts positively, which upsets Helena. Helena spends some time moping around the house until Farron returns. He takes a pill and then rapes her again. That night, Helena realizes that the moon is at its peak, which amplifies people's powers. No dinner arrives, and Helena wonders if the undead servants are dead, meaning Farron is dead. She goes looking for him and finds him in his room, not dead, but drunk. He pins her to the wall with his hand on her throat. He calls her by her first name and gives us this poetic line that I'm sure Tumblr girlies love. They kiss. Farron continues kissing her, then strips her. Helena becomes aroused and moans, which causes Farron to freeze. Helena then begins to cry and runs away. The horror of her body betraying her seems to be the final straw. She begins self-harming by banging her head into a window. Farron finds her and does some mind magic to remove all the bad feelings, similar to the tablets. He asks why she did that, and she replies that she's been trying to kill herself this whole time, that the idea of being dependent on him and having feelings for him is so unthinkable. She says she would rather be raped in Central, as Stroud suggested. Farron remarks kind of out of nowhere that she's thinking about surviving, but neither the audience nor Helena really knows what he means. He's quite mean here, insinuating a lot of things about her role in the war and how useless and lonely she is. Stroud returns and confirms Helena is pregnant. Absolutely insane timeline here. Helena has a panic attack and Farron has to calm her down. Farron defends her from Stroud, denouncing the repopulation program. Farron then sedates Helena and apologizes to her. Helena wakes and Farron tells her that she will be on full-time observation to make sure she doesn't do anything to cause a miscarriage. Farron brings her a book about pregnancy. Helen begs Farron to make sure to protect the baby, showing sudden maternal instincts. Farron agrees. Helena thinks he isn't being very sincere and demands to be left alone. The next few days, she goes outside to look for ways to kill herself again. She begins getting sick from the pregnancy, falling very, very ill. Stroud shows up and says that having a powerful fetus will take a lot of magic, which will hopefully remove the internal block on Helena's brain, and that they don't expect her to live through the pregnancy. Farron did not know this. He is very caring to Helena while she's sick, brushing her hair and massaging her hands. Helena eventually awakens in a fit as all of her memories come flooding back. We only get pieces and it's very unclear who is speaking or what the context is. But don't worry, because that brings us to part 2. Before we get started on part 2, let's discuss part 1 briefly. I'm going to be so honest with you all. This section of the book made me feel icky. I did not enjoy it. I didn't enjoy writing the summary about it. I didn't enjoy saying all of this out loud. I felt pretty confused by pretty much everything that had to do with the magic system and how it relates to our current characters. I hated Farron the whole time. And when viewed from Helena's point of view, I couldn't understand why she occasionally had those moments of being like, oh, he's not so bad. Girl, he raped you and he murdered people in front of you. They have no pre-existing relationship in this part, besides being in school and both trying to get the top score in their grade. This part of the book really frustrated me and is honestly a big reason this book failed as a whole. Remember, I have never read this story in any capacity. This was my first impression of the book and of our couple, and it was a bad one. But let's get into part 2, because unlike part 1, I actually found myself enjoying that one some. Surprise, we're in the past. Did you know this book had multiple timelines? Because I sure didn't. The war is raging, but unfortunately, we know how this ends because the book already told us. The resistance loses, basically everyone dies. So right off the bat, I was already like a little disappointed. It was hard to feel that the stakes were real when I know the outcome, and I know that most of these characters are probably dead by the end. Even if I don't necessarily know how it happens, it's hard to like connect with anyone if you know what's going to happen to them. But sure, let's find out how. We begin part 2 on Solstice Eve. Helena is visiting Lila and Soren's uncle, Sebastian Bayard. We meet Rhea and Titus, Soren and Lila's parents. Titus sustained a mine injury sometime prior to this, and Helena has tried to heal him before. Rhea gives Helena a present of a handmade knitted sweater. Immediately taken out of the moment because all I could think was Molly Weasley. But let's keep moving. Helena and Luke have a conversation about how the war is going. We get a creation story about the eternal flame told to the children at this event. Part 2 begins this thing where we get the month and the year for the date of the events that are happening. I'm only going to tell you the ones that are new. So every month I'll give you an update basically, but like it'll be like multiple chapters are in February, multiple chapters are in this month. But sometimes it also just like goes from February to like May. So just know that it's a little all over the place, but I thought it'd be kind of fun to include them and give you some of the timeline as we're getting it. So yeah, also all of the months have fun magical names, but they're not that original, but I'll tell them to you anyways in the colloquial ones and the magical ones. So February 1786. Helena is healing a young patient. The hospital matron tells Helena about a council meeting and sends her off to give the hospital report. Helena reports rising casualties and suggests using necromancy with permission from people before they die to support the war. She is swiftly turned down and shunned for the idea. There's some discussion about how bad the war is going. Helena is talking with a leader named Crowther who tells her that Cain Farron has offered to spy for the resistance. In return, he wants a pardon and he wants Helena. I literally wrote in my notes, what? Helena ends up agreeing. She's to see him twice a week as a liaison, taking information from him back to the resistance, all off the record, of course. We get some lore about how healing works in this world. There's something called the toll, capital T, that slowly drains healers. We learn that Helena has a special necklace, a holy amulet that is traditional for a healer to wear. The necklace supposedly helps prevent the toll. Luke tells Helena that they have new ways to kill the Undying. Helena has a conversation about Farron with Crowther, who reveals he doesn't think Farron is really loyal. Farron did reveal how to kill the Liches and the Undying, which is what Luke just told her. Crowther also thinks Farron is subconsciously obsessed with Helena and showed his hand by requesting her. Crowther says Helena is to bring Farron to his knees using any means necessary. We're at the liaison point of Factory Outpost. There's a remark about electricity in the building, which made me realize, oh yeah, there's electricity here. Somebody mentioned light switches earlier. Okay, sure. It just like really doesn't fit the vibe that we're setting with all the magic, but whatever. Helena meets Farron and makes a vow that she's his while internally saying her brains and feelings never will be. Farron doesn't really believe her and she begs him to tell her what to do. He asks for a kiss. They kiss and Helena uses magic on him. She realizes that he's undying. We also know that he has killed Apollo Holdfast by now, along with presumably other resistance people too. Farron gives her a ring, one that he has a matching pair to. It's a way to communicate, like some coins I remember. She, of course, has to put it on her left ring finger. Farron says it's one way so he can contact Helena. She asks to be able to contact him and he gets very aggressive and says no. They arrange the days to meet in the future. She gets an envelope from him addressed to Aurelia and they part. Helena reports that Farron is undying and about the ring. Crowther tells Helena more about Farron and his signs of vivimancy. When she meets Farron next, he pins her to the wall, touching her neck. He then invades her mind without warning, which I personally feel is pretty violating. She doesn't know about this skill and he tells her it is called animancy. Geez, the skill sure sounds like some other magic mind reading I know. Farron gives her some basic instructions on how to block this magic, including using distractions in her brain. Helena reports about the mind reading and is immediately cut from getting all info about the war, which is pretty smart on the resistance part. She meets Farron again and is able to play a distracting memory. She gets a headache from this and Farron gives her opium. We get a repeat of the confession moment about killing Apollo that we saw in part 1. Helena is also sympathetic to how lonely Farron likely feels, which like, okay girl, but he kills people and he assaulted you in the previous chapter. Get up! Helena returns and meets her trainees, who she's basically training to replace her. Helena and Farron meet again. He immediately invades her mind. He asks about her medical affinity and what she studied. Helena reveals she traveled with Luke, but we don't know why and never learn more about this in the rest of the book. Helena asks about Aurelia, and he says that they're betrothed, but that he's uninterested in her. March or Matthias, 1786. Helena continues to practice blocking. Farron continues to test her. Crowther confirms to Helena that she has basically no clearance now. He sends her on an errand to the wetlands, and while she's out there, this floodgate opens and a creature comes out. As she's making her way away from it, the ring burns. They meet, and Farron is surprised that Helena was there and that she saw the beast, and he calls it a chimera. He doesn't want her going there and tells her to stop, or that he'll make her stop since he owns her. Gross. Helena tells him that she doesn't carry any weapons. Farron says he will train her on that too. He also confirms he frequents brothels and then comes on to her. He and her banter, and he orders her to strip naked as a lesson. Farron says he doesn't want her, but that he likes owning her, and tells her to strip again. She undresses, but is verbally assaulting him with words that cut deep, saying he's dead inside and that he uses his power to hurt people. He gets mad and orders her out, so she leaves. Helena reports the chimera to the Eternal Flame. Helena tells them that she's working on a chemistry experiment and could use an extra hand. She's told Shizio could help, who we met at the beginning of the book because he was working with the necromancers. Aprilist, 1786. Helena shows up to the outpost and Farron is late. She's convinced he's not coming because of what she said. He shows and she apologizes. Farron replies that she could have said no instead of provoking him, which could she have? You were literally taunting her, saying you owned her and could do whatever you want to her. But okay. Helena doesn't believe this either. She asks where the chimeras came from, and Farron says they're made from animals from multiple places, including zoos. Zoos exist here? Farron leaves an envelope and leaves. He doesn't give anything useful for several visits. The next visit, Farron shows up injured, his entire arm having been severed. He's undying, so it will regenerate, supposedly. Helena wants to help heal him and does. She also confirms that he's 16 forever. She asks if he was made undying as punishment, and Farron says, how could it be? Helena is pretty off-kilter by him being injured, and it seems to change her opinion of him. Helena shows up at the outpost, and Farron immediately starts a fight with her to see how she'll do. She falls and breaks her wrist and calls for a stop. Farron instead pins her to the floor, grabs her hand, and starts crushing it. He tells her he could kill her with his bare hands and calls her pathetic and weak. Helena leaves, her hands very damaged. She gets to the hospital to heal them. Later, she's back at the outpost with a new plan from the Resistance in case anything goes wrong. A bunker thing with a radio? Good to know radios exist. We're using rings, though. Why use a radio when you can use a ring? Farron shows up and he is apologetic. He says he wants her to start training and for her to increase her food rations if possible. Back at the Resistance, Helena is given the job of dissecting a chimera because even though there are apparently zoos, vets or biologists don't exist to do this. Instead, we're going to use the healer. Farron continues giving info, but the Flame finds most of it to be kind of useless. At a meeting, Farron tells her that the High Necromancer will be out of the country, which is very unusual, and that Farron is going with. May or Mayus, 1786. With that information, the Resistance plans an attack. They suffer great injuries, but they win. They win basically a bunch of ports back. She goes to the outpost and Farron is there looking gaunt. He had been punished for losing. He's clearly sympathetic to the Flame and injured. He nearly collapses while leaving. Helena heals him, revealing her vibomancy, which is supposed to be a secret. Farron calls her a bitch. Cool. Helena asks about his back, which is quite gruesome. There's basically been some magic carved into his back with a metal alloy welded in. Helena helps contain it so that he can survive. He's in a lot of pain and she asks if she can give him something for it, to which he replies that they don't work on him. She reveals she can stimulate something in his brain to put him to sleep. Farron allows her to do it and Helena starts healing him. She realizes that the alchemy symbols on his back are words, basically casting a spell on him to make them become his core traits. They're all kind of synonyms to me, but okay. As he regains consciousness, she massages his hands. She calls him by his first name, and he allows it. Junius, 1786. Helena is out and runs into a Necrothal, who reveals itself to be Farron's. She follows it to find Farron drinking and injured in kind of a panic room. She examines him and determines it's too late to save him and that he's dying. She takes off her own special amulet and decides she's going to use it to save him. but it falls and shatters. Now there's like a liquid form of whatever was inside it, which she puts on Farron's skin and it absorbs inside him. He stops dying and his body adapts to the array in his back. Farron reveals that the High Necromancer wants a prison guard. He also says that the Undying are bound to the High Necromancer, who uses pieces of his bones to make them undying. Biblical. Helena then performs a cultural ritual from her home in Etruss to pray for Farron's survival. July, Julius, 1786. The next time Helena treats Farron, his hair is streaking silver. I didn't mention this before, but it was brown before. Now it's silver. Farron reveals he's been given a dog chimera to train as a test. We get a cute moment between the two of them. It seems Farron's close call to death may have changed him. We get our first official bout of the motif of these two telling each other not to die, something that will continue repeating throughout the rest of the book. A scout returns to the resistance base after having been experimented on and dies. Helena is told she has to do the autopsy. She sees Farron again and he insults her lack of training. Cool. Right back to being mean. He tries to have his thralls attack her and she panics, asking him to call them off, begging him. She's so scared that she throws her hands out and literally eviscerates them. There's like blood everywhere. He has her shower and she wears his clothes after. Farron has cleaned up and he gives her some alcohol. Farron asks when she found out she was a Vivimancer. There had previously been this like hospital massacre and we get some exposition about that. Basically, Helena was the only survivor because of powers. Farron reveals that he designed the array on his back, picking the wards himself. Helena does the autopsy. Now, even though this is a very small part of the book, I actually have a pretty big problem with how the book handled this, and it is so niche. So forgive me as I give you a little background about myself and why this pissed me off. As Helena is doing the autopsy, she says she wished she could cover the face so she didn't have to look at it while she was working, but the dead had to be respected. The dead had to be respected. This world has some complex burial and death rituals that I don't really understand even after rereading them because the exposition for them is extremely clunky. So perhaps this is referencing that. Maybe like your eyes have to see heaven or something. I don't know. In which case, that would be a great time to tell the audience about them. But I don't know or remember them. So instead, I'm mad because I, Tara Mulcoyd, have worked in cadaver labs for both humans and animals. And it is so disrespectful to not cover the body while doing dissections. Even for animals, we cover the heads out of respect. Bodies are treated with dignity. I can maybe forgive the book for the dissecting someone you know because this is war, but it is truly baffling for me to include this line about respect. I don't know Senlin Yu's history or if they studied biology in any capacity, but this kind of ticked me off and showed either a lack of proper world-building explanation or a lack of respectful research for this scene. Anyways, back to the book. Helena finds that the person was probably experimented on to try and remove their magic, like the manacles we saw in part 1. Crowther confronts Helena for getting too close to Farron. Helena meets Farron and says she can heal more of his back. He mentions alchemy suppression, but doesn't have any further info. We learn about the Stone of the Heavens, an object from one of the gods' soul. Farron says he doesn't believe in gods at all. Helena is in her lab and Luke visits. She turns down an offer to hang out and she goes to see Farron for a healing session. He has now fully been healed. Helena wants to leave, but Farron says she should stay and have a drink, and she agrees. They drink together and Farron laments about Helena's responsibility complex. He calls her by her first name for the first time and she realizes she's kind of attractive to him. This is the point in the book where I was like, okay, this is kind of cute. Maybe I kind of get it. Farron asks her to take her hair out of the braids and says it's soft. He's drunk, but gentle. They kiss, they make out. It starts getting heavy and Farron says she should go. Helena says she can't get into the city because the checkpoints are closed. She starts crying and they talk about why they kissed. She falls asleep and wakes up to find herself tangled up with Farron. Helena goes back to the resistance and is brought in to deal with an enemy who has been tortured. The prisoner says the resistance is going to lose the war and reveals himself to be Lancaster. The prisoner, Lancaster, is tortured and Helena heals him on repeat, showing the cruelty of the resistance. Helena goes to the outpost but finds it's locked. A Neanderthal finds her a few days later and hands her an envelope. She begins working on tonics for healing. In Augustus, we learn about an undying named Blackthorn who's causing trouble. We also learn he's a cannibal. Okay. Helena goes back to the outpost a week later, only to find the Undying have retaken it. She tries to defend herself with magic and find that she's experiencing burnout from healing too much and doesn't have enough magic to do it. She's attacked and injured, and a spike impales her leg. She manages to find cover. Farron finds her and thinks she's pulling a trick by acting weak. She reveals her burnout and injury to him, and he heals her after being coached on her by how to do it. September 1786. Helena meets Farron the next week. He says she should be trained. Later, they discuss the toll, the way healing affects the body. Farron demonstrates to her how you can't take a person's vitality by force, showing that Helena couldn't have killed her mother by being born, something she previously believed. Farron continues trying to explain this to Helena and brings a Neanderthal in. He tells her to steal its vitality, and she does. Farron explains that this is the easiest way to kill thralls. We also learn that this is a skill only animancers can do. They have a combat lesson, but he's harsh and vicious about it and insists she needs to defend herself. She leaves in a huff, saying he's a terrible teacher. October 1786. They continue the defense training and Helena starts getting better. They have a back and forth about Helena only having a basic combat knife, even after Farron previously told her to get something better. Farron's an asshole to her, but Helena was kind of testing him to see how he would react to her disobeying his request for a new weapon. Farron asks for her alloy, which she does not know. Helena has Shizio test her alloy affinity. Out of the 9 metals tested, she scores high on a lot of them. It's remarked that she could be a metallurgist. They decide that the best for her would be a nickel titanium alloy, and she tells this to Farron. They train some more. Back at base, Luke returns in a fit because Lila was captured. Shortly after, she's brought back injured. They work really hard and they save her. We learn Luke and Lila had a thing before. There's some drama about how Luke acted out of line because someone he loved was hurt. Luke laments about being seen as a hero. Shizio and Helena are inspecting the metal that was in the girl they autopsied. They find it's a rare metal from the east that can dampen the powers of people. Farron and Helena have a conversation about how the flame can win the war, but it is not looking good. December 1786. The war is going very bad. Helena meets Farron and he collapses. He'd been stabbed with the alloy of inert metal that Shizio and Helena were just discussing. Helena performs surgery to get it out. Farron wakes after and immediately tries to choke her. Awesome. They have a convo about the war and how the guild families were recruited. We get a fascinating piece of information from Farron where he tells us that the flame and the holdfast have been very slow to adapt to changes in the modern world. Things like new metal discoveries contradicted what they believed to be divine wisdom, and their failure to get on board soon enough resulted in a wedge between the faithful and those who were keeping up with the times. I thought this was truly an excellent allegory and reminded me a lot of like the Mormon church here in America. Mormons, or the Church of Jesus Christ and Latter-day Saints, like to say that they're very progressive, that they love everyone and that they're a normal Christian church, but their beliefs are still very entranced in the old ways and they're like a few decades behind for adapting. Like there's this in fall of 2025, they just released new garments, new sacred underwear just dropped, guys, which is like tank tops for women. So now women can wear tank tops, finally. These failures to adapt quick enough means they often lose young members of the church when they learn more about the world. The contradictions the church spouts, supposedly from the mouth of God, makes anyone with like a slightly unstable view of faith prone to crumble. In Alchemised, Senlin Yu is saying that the flame is a similar kind of religious order, and I really enjoyed that. I thought that was really fascinating, and I thought that was a good thing to make your good guys be. It was very nuanced. Anyways, Helena kind of bites back at Farron because she's still pretty religiously indoctrinated. Farron implies that Helena and people like her, foreign people on scholarships, are the reason the guild joined the necromancers. Farron also calls her a whore, and Helena calls herself that too. Again, girl, get up. Later, she meets him and reveals she lost her knife because she broke it to make tools for his surgery. She gives him a present since it's solstice time, a healing kit. We get a comment about eyes being healed. Remember part 1, guys? Remember the eyes? Farron has a gift for her too, a set of daggers. I wrote in my notes cute, but I guess I had already forgotten he just called her a whore. He may be verbally abusive, but he's good at gift giving, I guess. The Eastern alloy is now called nullium. Helena has been working with it and has theorized that if it's targeted at or inside limbs, it may completely cut off resonance. The flame reveals that Farron has climbed rank. They also knew he had been punished and was dying, and they had hoped he would die. Helena's like, okay, you should have told me that. I assume you wanted him alive. She tells them she gave him the Sunstone. Ilva, one of the leaders, is horrified and gives us this huge chunk of important exposition. She basically reveals that in this old creation story, an old necromancer used an object called the Stone of the Heavens to make the first immortal people. Basically, this confirms that there are no gods and that the religion is a lie. The miracles that supposedly happened to Luke and to other leaders have all been careful war strategy or chance. The religion is fake, the original miracle is a lie. Ilva tells Helena she wants her to kill Farron. Helena still thinks she can make him loyal, but says if she can't, she will kill him. She's given a month to do it. There's a solstice celebration and we learn gramophones exist. Cool. Helena is distraught thinking about how Farron will be dead in a month. She's told things are going very well for the flame and that the faith is strong and the flame will win the war. And she now realizes that her killing Farron will be the final miracle the flame needs. She tells Luke that she is not the same person she was 6 years ago, and she doesn't know if they can be friends when the war ends. She tells him if they were ever friends, he needs to let her go. To be honest, I think this would be more impactful if I knew anything about their relationship, but I really don't. Helena is literally having a faith crisis, and in my notes I wrote, what a fun arc, because at least it's not her being abused. She goes to the outpost and we get her first suicidal parts of part 2. Not very fun. She meets Farron and admits she wanted to see him. He realizes something is wrong and she says she doesn't want him to die. Janua, sound like a baby. January, 1787. Farron and Helena train again. At one point he pins her down sitting on top of her. This training continues. Later she's slow and he asks what's wrong. He calls her a martyr. They fight again, and this time she's able to pin him down, knife against him. He tells her to do it, and Helena realizes he has expected her to betray him. They make out, clothes come off, they have sex, and Farron asks after if she was a virgin. Farron says he would have been gentler if he had known. Okay. We get a very gross paragraph shaming girls who have sex. He then calls her a whore again. I'm sorry, but this guy sucks. He reveals he has done all this to get revenge for his mom. He says he picked her because she was no one and unimportant. Helena bites back, but Farron reveals that in his last year of school, his father failed the High Necromancer and his mother was tortured because of it. Becoming undying and killing Apollo is how he proved himself as loyal. I wonder where I've heard that plot before. Could it be Draco Malfoy and his father in books 5 and 6 of Harry Potter? Anyway, one day he has been tortured and comes back injured and his mother saw him and died. He begins crying and holds her and says he can't care for someone again. Farron reveals he doesn't trust the Flame's leadership. Helena tells him the Flame wants him to die and that she has a month to kill him. He asks what will happen to her if he's dead, and she says they will offer her to the next spy. Truly a baffling response to me. This seemed like a one-off situation where Farron asked for her specifically. We haven't really been led to believe that the Resistance is in the business of trafficking girls, but sure, okay, maybe they saw this worked and would try it again. Whether it's true or not, Farron believes it, and this low-key convinces him to do whatever the Flame wants. Helena returns to base and tells Crother Farron wants to prove his loyalty. Helena doesn't say that they had sex, but Crother clearly intuits it. He says she should get healed and allow people to look out for her. This is like the one good guy of the book, apparently. He says she's the most exceptional asset to the Flame. Crother joins Helena for her next meeting with Farron. Helena isn't allowed in as the two talk, but she hears Crother command Farron to beg. I take back what I just said. When Crother emerges, he confirms that it was a success. February 1787. The Resistance is bombed, and there are a lot of casualties. Crother tells Helena she can only see Farron once a week now. Helena heals Luke, but it's like really awkward and he's mad at her. Farron is also mad at her and avoidant and mean. Helena feels she trapped him and she feels trapped too. When she returns from the outpost, she learns Luke is missing. Lila and Soren are injured from nolium. They have to do thoracic surgery on Lila to remove it. Soren has an injured eye that is basically destroyed. He tells Helena he's not sure if Luke surrendered to save Lila or not and that he might be dead. Helena is sent to Farron to find out about Luke's capture. Farron shows up and he has no knowledge of the attack. Helena tells him they need Luke back. She tries to talk about their kiss and relationship, but Farron bites back, comparing the situation with her to being enslaved by the High Necromancer. We get this obviously quotable line, which was probably more poetic when this work was called Manacled. When Helena returns to base, Soren enlists her to help with some rogue plan to get Luke back, orchestrated behind the scenes by Crowther. Helena agrees to go. Luke is in this like maze thing, and honestly, they barely have a plan. Helena gets her medical kit and gives Shizio instructions on how to go to the outpost to deliver a note with information she writes down. She goes back with the group, ready to leave. Aprilis, 1787. The group leaves for the rescue. They're in the building and find a different injured person who isn't Luke. It's someone named Wagner, someone Crowther was looking for, so they take him with. They run into Farron's father as a lich. They kill him and move on. They open a door and find Luke being operated on. Soren kills everyone in the room. Luke is alive and Helena helps heal him. He's still injured and can't move, so Helena gives him a shot of epinephrine. He's up, but he has no magic and he wants a weapon. As they escape, Helena's ring is burning. As they leave, they run into a bunch of chimeras and necrothals. They fight and then Blackthorn shows up. He injures Soren and Helena tries to heal him, but he dies. Rest in peace, Soren. Another person, Pernal, also dies. Helena uses necromancy and resurrects Soren. He's not really alive, just controlled by her. She's directing him on what to do, and then Helena is stabbed. Blackthorn confronts her, calling her a necromancer. He breaks both of her wrists. He does some wound play on her, which I will spare you from. He's torturing her, and then Soren is like lost in this river. Then Blackthorn is suddenly dragged away and killed by some unknown undying. It's Farron! He's killing all the thralls, but oh no, he's also attacking the resistance. Farron wants to leave the resistance behind, but Helena is insistent she won't go with him if he doesn't save them too. He brings her to another room, demanding she tell him how to heal her. He heals her, and we get another "you could be a healer" line. Farron chastises her for being in the fight, revealing how much he cares for her and how she's not expendable. She's important and not replaceable. That's sweet. They kiss. Farron tells her how they can escape. She wakes the others, but Luke is like sick. When they get back, they're put in custody for leaving without permission. Helena is sure her necromancy will be revealed and she'll be arrested. A healer comes and gets her, saying Luke was causing trouble. They say his organs were poisoned. He calls for her, but then violently hits her. Does this remind anyone of a certain PETA scene? Ilva confirms they're not taking whatever Luke says seriously given his condition, but that they believe the rescue was a miracle. Helena is taken off duty, but that's her only repercussion. She wants to speak to Farron since he has used necromancy before. She gets to the outpost, then remembers that they were only supposed to meet in an emergency. She has a moment and just like lies down on the ground. Farron shows up and she thinks she's hallucinating. He talks to her about necromancy and says she's going into shock. Helena says how lonely she is and he offers to let her use him, which she refuses. He puts her on this like giant dog chimera he has that he can ride like a flying horse. Farron takes her to a house and they kiss, they have sex, this time in a bed. Helena has a panic attack afterwards and calls herself a whore. I wonder where she got that idea. They kiss, he compliments her, and we get another moment about eyes. This author loves talking about eyes. Helena wakes up in Farron's bed and immediately is like, I gotta get out of here, even though she doesn't know where she is or how to get home. Farron sees her trying to leave and doesn't stop her, basically telling her they just had a one-night stand. Bro, you just said you memorized her eyes and would kill people for her. How is that a hookup? Then he pulls her back and kisses her and says, "You're mine," which is more like the Farron I know. Luckily, Helena is into it. They fall asleep again, and when they wake up, Farron tells her that his chimera is named Amaris. Helena asks about how much he knew of the Flames' plan to kill him. Apparently, he knew a lot. Helena tells him she saw his father as a lich. He had thought his father was dead. Helena tells him about the Stone of the Heavens, but not that it's inside him. She just implies she used it to help heal him. They have a convo about their situation, and Farron truly apologizes. She says she has to go, and he, of course, tries to get her to stay. She tells him she will always come back. We meet Amaris the Chimera and learn about some animal cruelty, monster cruelty. Basically, the chimeras have a lot of pain as they grow, so Farron has to do spells on her to heal her. They fly back, and as she's about to leave, they have a moment where he asks her to stay again. He tries to convince her there's no hope, no gods, but she still has some hope. I want to say that at this point, if part 1 hadn't happened, I would be low-key rooting for this couple. If I could remove part 1 from my mind, I'd be like, this is kind of cute. He's kind of redeeming himself. We'll touch back on this. Crowther finds her and says the prisoner won't speak to anyone but her. He also makes Helena tell Pernal's sister that they lost Pernal. The sister Ivy attacks Crowther for not protecting her sister, who was apparently named Sophia. The prisoner needs a translator, but we learn about another city or country named Hevgloss and how they dealt in slaves from prisoners. The High Necromancer got involved using the prisoners as parts for the Undying as like sacrifices. We also learned that the Undying can use necromancy because of them being connected to the High Necromancer. The High Necromancer uses his bones to make the Undying. Like I said, biblical. Later, when the Flame goes back for a follow-up interrogation, they find that the prisoner is dead, killed by the guards. Lila is on trial for compromising Luke's safety. She's basically taking the fall for his capture. Another Resistance member, Penny, asks Helena if what Luke said was true about the necromancy. Helena does not tell the truth, but she does speak out against the gods. Penny is scandalized and talks about purity, to which Helena replies, if the High Necromancer wins, there will be no purity. Helena is studying Lila's blood to find out why her magic is gone. Elaine, one of the healers Helena trained, has been named head healer and Luke's designated healer. Helena laments on how she misses Farron. Helena is outside and a thrall approaches her to take the items and envelopes she has for Farron. It then speaks something she thought was impossible from them. It tells her to follow and leads her to Farron. They kiss, they have sex. Afterwards, they talk, and Helena says she doesn't know what will happen to her if they win the war. Farron says he could get her out of the country now. She says no. They agree that after the war, they'll run away together. Romantic. Helena asks about the Undying transformation, and Farron literally dissociates. He tells her what he knows. He confirms that killing the Undying weakens the High Necromancer. Before she goes, Farron returns her daggers, which she thought were lost in the battle. Turns out he had spares made. He says he wants to see her more, and they arrange it, planning to use Amaris. He gives her permission to use the ring to call him. Farron and Helena see each other more using Amaris. Helena continues to heal him after battles. Farron is possessive, and to be honest, so is Helena in her own way, commanding him not to die. Farron talks about his mom and tells a story about how he tried to escape with her and had everything planned, and that was the day she died. He begs Helena to let him get her out, which she again refuses. Meanwhile, the war isn't going well for the Resistance. Luke and Lila are improving. Shigio has designed a cuff to suppress magic, but it doesn't do it fully. Helena makes a suggestion that to make it fully repress the magic, it would need to go internally through the wrist. Farron continues to meet with Helena and is often injured. Mayus, 1787. The Undying use a nullium bomb, the shrapnel of which can ruin someone's magic. Luke is back on his feet and makes a speech about how the gods are on their side. Helena is back at work at the hospital and is working with information Wagner gave. She tries to do some life force magic with dying patient and tries to channel the magic with different materials. It's not working. Helena finds Lila in tears and she reveals she's pregnant and that she's a Vivomancer. Luke is the father. Helena offers to help Lila abort it and Lila refuses. She thinks she's going to miscarry anyway, so that it doesn't matter either way. She's not going to tell Luke in case she loses it. Lila and Helena go to Crowther to figure out what to do. Lila is given a fake illness and is put into isolation. In the meantime, Helena studies pregnancy. The matron provides her with a book and reveals she knows Lila is pregnant. Luke begins doing more leadership stuff. He leads an attack where they find tanks with bodies in them, like those stasis tanks we saw at the beginning of the book. They capture a warden and Helena agrees to help interrogate her. We learn this woman is Mandel, one of the people we know from part 1. Helena uses her powers to get her to talk and sees the answers she wants with her mind. Mandel reveals that they're trying to keep the bodies fresh for testing the Undying. Junius, 1787. The war continues. Helena tells Farron literally everything, lamenting on her struggles to channel with the materials. She's been working on a nullium thing to help him get not hurt as much. Another bomb goes off near the alchemy tower this time. Nolium is in the air, meaning it can enter through the lungs and blood. A man finds Helena and says she's supposed to be at a different hospital. She goes with, and the hospital is a mess. When she gets there, a leader tells her to go back because they don't want Farron freaking out. Helena takes command instead, ordering people and triaging. She orders an evacuation and is coordinating ambulances. She watches as one of them is driven by a lich and crashes. She's badly injured from the explosion that comes out and has a piece of metal in her chest. She knows she's in danger of dying and tries to contact Farron with the rings, but like her magic isn't all there. Thralls are in the building, literally killing everyone. She passes out, and when she wakes up, Farron is there. He had sent the thralls as soon as he heard about the bombings. Farron heals her alongside a medical team and says if she dies, he will murder everyone. Romantic, I guess? He is pissed off. They get over it and they kiss. They're at Farron's family country estate, the same one from part 1. Farron leaves and he returns, and she asks about the medical team and what happened to them. There's a back and forth, and he talks about how he kills people, lots of them, and he does it for her. Helena is horrified. He tells her the city is in a bad state. She learns it's been 4 days since the bombing and begs him to tell Crowther that she's alive. Her magic is gone and it will take some time to recover. Helena tells Farron she thinks she severed a reanimation with obsidian during the fight. She recovers slowly. Farron reveals that the High Necromancer is considered a god to the Undying. He also says that the High Necromancer wants Luke alive for unknown reasons. The Undying know there's a spy and suspect it's Farron and are looking for him. They have sex and she almost says I love you but doesn't. Farron drops her off with the Resistance at her request. She makes up lies to Crowther and the matron about where she had surgery. Ilva and many others are dead. War is not going well. There's barely any fighting and the council is at low numbers. Helena tells Crowther about the obsidian and that she will work with him if he can guarantee Farron's safety. He agrees. The obsidian is a breakthrough and they're able to kill liches and take out all the necrothals too. Farron meets Helena and says that the necromancy forces have all been pulled from combat. Helena continues to interrogate people using her powers. She pushes victims far, including killing 2 people on accident. Remember that side character Titus, Lila's father with the mind injury? Helena has been doing research and thinks she can cure him. Lila's pregnancy is going well, but she still doesn't want to tell anyone she's carrying the heir to a nation, and I guess she's just not required to. Helena gets ready to heal Titus, and Luke interrupts, accusing her of being bad for what happened with Soren, Titus's son. This makes the family pause on the healing offer. She goes back to Luke's room after and finds him smoking opium, which she is horrified by. They have a little moment of commiserating on why they aren't friends anymore. Luke names some religious reasons about why they're gonna win. Helena, who doesn't believe anymore, kind of like scoffs at it, and he continues to refuse to let her heal Titus. Helen meets Farron, who says he was on a diplomatic mission at Hevgloss. Now, maybe I missed something, but even with my reread skimming, I'm still a little lost in how he suddenly isn't suspected of being the spy. But sure, he's back in the High Necromancer's good graces. He asks for a mission and panics when there's nothing from the Resistance. She explains to him that she bargained for less stress on him, and instead of being grateful, he's mad. He's mad she's in the war in the first place, which I can understand, but like also mad that like she would try and do anything for him. But like, okay, whatever. They go back to his place and have a quiet and sensual night together. Romantic. The Undying officially align with Hevgloss. The Resistance wants to send Luke to ally with Novus, who apparently exist and have a queen. And listen, I read this book on my iPad, but apparently there's a map included in some versions of the book. I think even with a map, I would still be lost because we barely know about these countries and their geographic location isn't going to change the fact that my knowledge of them is so lacking. Anyways, more people are enlisting and Helena tells Crowther she wants to build an obsidian bomb. She starts working on it, and the whole time she feels like she's sowing Farron's doom. Helena tells Farron about the bomb being ready. She tells him she wants to be the one to transport it, and he does not want to let her. He insists he will set the bomb, not her. They meet that night. They spend some time together. They talk about how the war might end. It's kind of like a final goodbye moment. They realize that the stone may save his life when the High Necromancer dies. They make out. He calls her mine. It's decided Shizio will deliver the bomb. While it's happening, Helena visits Lila, and she feels the baby move. Lila asks Helena if she will have kids, and Helena says no. Lila is like, you might change your mind, which like, huh? Lila tells Helena Luke knows about the baby, and Helena says she needs to talk to Luke. She goes to him and sees Elaine, who has been giving Luke continuous epinephrine injections. August 1789. 1987. Luke leaves without getting to speak to Helena. Word gets in that the bomb went off and her ring burns. Helena has kind of a moment and collapses. The matron helps her and tells her that Luke has brain fevers from brain inflammation, during which he shouts, "Get him out." Helena knows what's happening. Animancy. Helena tries to find Crowther or Luke. She goes to the front lines to work with the medics and find him. People are already calling it a victory for the resistance. As Helena is healing people, they learn the Undying have taken over headquarters. Luke shows up and Helena says she needs to talk to him about Lila. He's like, now is not the time. And Helena reveals in like a very Hunger Games way that Lila is pregnant, shocking the people they're with. Luke is like, bro, I know, who cares? Helena bites back and is like, oh yeah? Well, I've seen those brain fevers before. And then Luke, I knew, wouldn't abandon Lila. So who are you? And then I kid you not, we get a cartoon villain reveal that Luke isn't Luke, but someone named Cetus. He lore dumps on us. He tells us that he was the necromancer from the Rivertide story and that he's also a piece of the High Necromancer who needs the holdfast baby. Luke kills this other guy, Sebastian, and attacks Helena. She uses her magic to go in his mind. She demands to talk to the real Luke. Cetus refuses and reveals Luke is an animancer. His power is apparently lighting up a room. Cetus does let Luke like front or whatever. The real Luke reveals that he wasn't even the one to have sex with Lila. Cetus was. Cetus then attacks Helena, who defends and stabs Luke. Luke is healed by her, but he's slowly dying. He says they have to leave together and she has to use necromancy on Sebastian so that no one knows he's dead yet. She does, and they pretend to leave like normal. They walk for a little bit before Luke collapses and dies. Helena is trying to find a way back to headquarters, but thralls are following her. She's hiding when an Undying finds her and she passes out. She wakes up and Farron is there. He's like, what happened? The war's over and you lost. Why was headquarters unguarded? She reveals that Luke is dead. We get this line about the war being pointless. Farron says it's time for her to go. Helena insists Lila has to come with them on their escape plan. She realizes that Farron has kept her unconscious for a while, but she's still insistent. She says if he gets Lila, she'll do anything for him. Farron agrees and leaves to get Lila and returns with her. Farron reveals he blew his cover by getting Lila. He's implicated as a spy now, which like deja vu, I feel like we just had this happen. Helena is devastated. She passes out, wakes up, and insists now she needs to speak to Shizio. Farron leaves and returns with Shizio. Amaris can apparently only carry 2 people at a time, so Helena tells Farron he should take Lila while she talks to Shizio. Once they're gone, she tells Shizio she didn't even really need him, just the items she told him to pick up in the letter. She's going to build another bomb to blow up the Westport lab where Farron lost his cover so she can save him. She decides to go and plant the bomb herself with necromancy. Helena makes it to a building and finds Ivy and Crowther. Ivy reveals she was the traitor to the resistance so that she could get revenge for her sister Sophia. Helena makes some necrothals and has them distribute bombs. She gets blown up and just like lies there. She remembers Farron and gets up, injecting herself with stimulants, and then she kills a chimera instantly. Okay. She runs into Lancaster and a lich named Althorn. Helena fights back and kills Althorn and injures Lancaster. She finds that Althorn had the Atreus Farron pendant, and as she reaches for it, she gets hit in the head. Lancaster and his backup aspirants, love when new words are introduced when the book is almost over, beat her up and she passes out. She wakes up in the headquarters with Matron Pace, and they're like in a cage. Below, Titus is torturing and cannibalizing his wife. Bodies are dismembered. It's gory. Luke shows up with the High Necromancer, who is wearing a crown. The High Necromancer publicly executes Luke. Helena is stuck in the cage when Mandel shows up and he orders her out. She says she wants Helena in the stasis. As she's being moved, someone says Helena is supposed to be interrogated. Helena realizes if they get in her mind and find out about Farron, he will be in big trouble. She's determined to block out the memory of him of the whole last 2 years. She's put in the stasis thing and left in the dark as she slowly goes into a coma. Her last thought is that Farron will understand and wait. And that brings us to part 3. I don't want to go too in depth about this, but I actually kind of liked part 2. Okay? Sue me. I kind of liked it. I thought that Farron was on like a good redemption arc. It seemed to be progressing kind of like fine. I didn't like how much he like demeaned Helena even after like sort of improving. I thought that was kind of icky. But if that had been like the only con, I would be like, okay, I get it. But then every time I would remember that he says like he owns her and that he's kind of a douchebag. So I don't know. I was conflicted. I was like feeling all these things where I was like, oh, I kind of get why people like this. And then I would remember part 1 and I would remember he's just like still a dick. And I was like, ah. Anyways, so that brings us to part 3, Mayus 1789. We're back to where we left off at the end of part 1. Remember, Helena was very ill from pregnancy. She had no memories of the last 2 years. Now all of these memories are back and Helena is confused. She asked Farron about Lila and Farron confirmed she's alive with a son. He showed the High Necromancer a dead Lila that was just a body double. Helena continues remembering things and has a seizure. She also has the thought of, why did he rape me? But instead asks him why he killed so many people. He says he was looking for her. Romantic, I guess? I want to say, Farron is suddenly much nicer than part 1. Like, immediately switched. I get that he was like massaging her hands towards the end of it, but like still. Helena realizes that the transference was her idea, the cuffs were her idea, kind of like alluding that it makes it her fault, absolves him or others of blame. I don't know, I found that icky. Helena asks about the plan and Farron says she will go south to be with Lila. Farron and Shizio have been looking for her since the war ended and Shizio designed the cuffs in the hopes that he would be the one to put them on her. Farron expositioned some more about the High Necromancer. He leaves for a few days before coming back, but he's distant. Helena tries to confirm if Farron will come south too, but he's kind of like elusive and vague, alluding to how he needs to finish up some things in Palladia. Maybe he'll come, maybe he won't. Helena starts improving. Farron brings her to a library in the house. Just imagine a scene like this, perhaps, like Beauty and the Beast. She's scared to go in at first because it's dark. Later, Helena asks about why he's waiting to leave, thinking that the High Necromancer will know he's a traitor if she's gone. Farron was trying to distract her with the library, I guess, and his plan is to get killed as a traitor. Basically, since he's still undying, it's harder for him to leave the country. Helena has a panic attack. They have a back and forth about how to do this, and he agrees to let her try and find a way to fix it. Helena tries to get Farron not to leave and then gets triggered from recent rape in this house. Helena gets all guilty about causing so much trouble and later asks for research tools, and Farron removes the metal in her wrist, preventing the magic. Later, Farron says he will arrange for her to have everything she needs for a magical abortion when she leaves, and they have a discussion about her sterilization. She says she's keeping the baby. Farron insists the baby is a product of rape, and Helena says, we were both raped, and that she loves him. He says it back. Did anyone else get a massive red flag? We were both raped. We were both raped? We were both raped. Anyway, Stroud returns, so the nullium goes back in her wrist. Stroud says that Helena's brain is messed up. She might lose her memories. She implies they're hoping for a boy animancer baby, but then reveals it's a girl, and everyone is upset because I guess patriarchy, and because the High Necromancer will apparently use this baby as his new body, and we couldn't have a woman in position of power in this world. Anyways, Junius, 1789. Helena and Farron talk, and we learn Farron used the stone on Helena at one point. Unclear how that happened. We learn that the High Necromancer can and has been watching the courtyard. Okay. Farron says he would like the baby to be named after his mother. Later, they're kissing and Helena says she wants to have sex. He refuses, but a few days later, they're getting hot and heavy. She has a flashback and says stop, which he does. She wanders, finding the room with the array and cage. She realizes it's an animancy array. She passes out and Farron is furious that she could have been hurt. He tries to get her to stop the research again, and we learn Aurelia is having a party tomorrow. Julius, July, 1789. Helena is paraded in front of the party to show off that she's pregnant. Feel like I've seen this before in The Handmaid's Tale. Stroud tells them that the baby will be the new body for the High Necromancer, and people literally laugh at her, which I found really funny. It's revealed that Farron is the father, and Aurelia did not know. The party ends, and there's a back and forth between Farron and Aurelia and Atreus. They accuse Farron of liking the prisoner too much and of being an obedient dog. Prisoners are then brought to the house and tortured because the High Necromancer is convinced there's a spy. Helena works on the array, theorizing that they may need a sacrificial soul to make it work. Helena says she can build another bomb. Farron is like over it. They kiss, they have sex, consensually this time. Helena calls it making love. New prisoners are dropped off, and one of the guards is Ivy in disguise, there to rescue Helena. Apparently, learning of her pregnancy was enough to convince her to switch sides again. Farron shows up and says they can't trust Ivy, which like I agree with. Helena says they can because Ivy owes them. Helena feels the baby move and so does Farron. Amaris will go with Helena and Shizio when they leave and then be released. Otherwise she would further implicate Farron. Aurelia confronts Farron about his father torturing people in the house. Together they confront Atreus about this, and Aurelia speaks out of turn, comparing herself to Atreus' wife Enid. Atreus kills Aurelia and Helena is like, no more more loose ends. Farron gives some excuse about wanting her gone for a while, and Helena is like, oh, I hate when you kill people for me. They're having a back and forth, and the lights flicker, and Farron says he's calling. Farron comes back and reveals the train, yes, there's trains in this world apparently, was attacked and Shizio was killed. The escape plan is all messed up now. Helena is convinced they're all going to die. Farron is like, no, you're still leaving. He's working on a new plan, and he comes back shaken, saying he killed a lot of people. Later, he comes back injured, and Helena heals him manually. He was tortured for his slaughtering of those people because it led to Havgloss, the country, allying with the anti-High Necromancer movement, the Liberation Front. Farron doesn't want his father to see him and says he needs to finish the final arrangements so that she can leave. Atreus is trying to find Helena and accuses her of the first bombing the Resistance did. He wants info from her and wants to know who the spy for the Resistance was. She confesses that she did the bomb, realizing the High Necromancer will kill Farron if they don't find out who did it. Helena tells him Farron is the spy, and Atreus doesn't believe her. She gets the advantage on him and gives her memories of Farron, Aeneid, and her. Farron shows up and Atreus confronts him on why Farron didn't tell him about his wife being tortured, and the two fight. Farron, for some reason, doesn't immediately kill his father, even though he's proven to be quite the threat. Ivy shows up and she has the bones Helena needs for the sacrifice ritual. Sophia, who has been made into a thrall, stole them. Farron insists he can't leave. They won't find a willing soul to do the ritual. But wait, Atreus volunteers himself. At this point in the book, I literally said out loud, this book is stupid. Because if this isn't the most convenient plot point you've ever heard. Anyways, Farron refuses at first, but Helena changes his mind. They do it, Farron lives, and they fly off on Amaris. They set the house on fire to erase the evidence. They land at a hunting cottage. Farron is weak, but he's human now. Helena injured her hand during the array procedure. She also has injuries on her back from Atreus. When she wakes up, they're gone. Farron healed her overnight. They fly again, making it to the sea, to a small house on the coast. I don't know, maybe a house that looks like this. They reunite with Lila. Lila isn't happy to see Farron, but they get over it, reconnecting. The next day, Helena goes out to the stables and finds Farron with Amaris. He's debating on if he should euthanize her, but decides not to because Helena says he shouldn't. Lila and her kid Apollo, Farron, and Helena all get on a ship headed south for a remote island. Someone on the boat shares that the High Reeve is gone and that other countries are planning on taking over. They make it to the house. Helena is still really nervous about getting caught, but Farron tells her they're safe. A newspaper confirms that Farron, Aurelia, Atreus, Ivy, and more are all listed as dead. The group adapts to life on the island. Amaris shows up, somehow having found them. Helena makes Farron promise to care about the baby and not be like his dad. She ends up on bed rest for the pregnancy and starts a journal with her recollection of the war. She goes into labor, the baby is born, and Helena says the baby has Farron's eyes. January 1770. Farron is reluctant to go to the baby, given the whole conception. Helena insists he had no choice in it. He holds the baby's hand. The baby, named Enid, and Farron bond. Years pass in mere lines. Palladia is liberated by the foreign nations, but the High Necromancer is still alive, and so is Stroud. The women in the rebreeding program get sent to a convent. Lila wants to go back and kill the High Necromancer. She wants Helena to help her build a bomb too. Cole, Lila's son, and Enid get a dog named after Luke's horse. Cool. Didn't know he had a horse. You learn something new in this book all the time. Lila does go back and she kills the High Necromancer. Lila is leading the reconstruction efforts for the Alchemy Institute, adding Vivimancy as a subject. A year and a half later, Lila comes back, but she wants to bring Pole back to Palladia. Lila wants Helena to come with, but she refuses to leave Farron. Lila tries to change her mind by saying how awful he is. Helena's like, yeah, duh, I know that. Why did you kill the High Necromancer? We get a famous line about if he's a monster, I'm his creator. Enid is hysterical about Pole leaving because they're friends. 4 years later, don't ask what year it is because the book doesn't tell you. Enid asks about the holes in Helena's wrists and asks if she had been captured in the war. Farron arrives with the newspaper confirming Stroud is dead. Farron killed her. Helena is pissed because he could have endangered the whole family. Helena ends up saying she's glad Stroud is dead. 10 years later, Helena and Farron are watching Enid live on a steamship. They have a little finale moment. Epilogue. July. Julius 1808. Enid meets with Lila and Apollo. She has an apprenticeship. Apollo is going to run the institute. I guess this new government is letting the holdfast just still be in charge. This is exhausting. Lila shows Enid a statue for resistance people who fell in the war. Penny shows up saying Enid looks like Helena, but that Helena died in the war, so that's impossible. Enid does not correct her. Enid gets a book about the war and she reads a passage about Farron. Cole shows up and they find a photo with Helena in it, a drawing that is included in the book. Enid is insistent that her mom deserves a book just about her. Enid and Cole kiss. We get a final line about Helena being a non-active member of the Order of the Eternal Flame, which is supposed to be tragic because we, the audience, know how much she really went through. And now the book is over. Boy, oh boy, over 1,000 pages, summarized as succinctly as I could for you. Now let's talk about it. I came out of this book feeling drained. I did not feel like I had a good time. This book didn't make me cry. I was annoyed at it. I found myself enjoying part 2, but every time I remembered how awful Farron was, it kind of ruined any enjoyment I was feeling. Now listen, I want to be very clear here. I'm not saying you can't enjoy this book. I'm not saying this book or the fanfiction it was based off of shouldn't have been made. I'm totally against censorship any form. However, I think the medium we engage with does say something. It says something about us, our culture, and the world around us. And I think if you're charging people money for a book, those people have the right to critique it. I'm not saying that it shouldn't have been written. They also have a right to look at the ethics of the book, both the contents inside it and the author who wrote it. That's why so many people, including myself, have put self-imposed bans on anything that profits JKR. Her opinions and money fund things I don't support and actively harms people. Her writing, while questionable at times, isn't necessarily doing the same harm, but buying that writing can do harm. With Alchemised, I have nothing against Senlin Yu. I don't really know them. This analysis isn't about them as a writer or a person. It is about the contents inside Alchemised and how I think the messages the book is sending to its readers are damaging, dangerous, and should have been treated differently. Let's discuss. In Olarante's video, How This Didn't Age Well Destroyed Media Literacy, she discusses something called moral media consumption. This dictates how we can critically analyze the media consumed so that we can mitigate the harm by parsing out the lessons and identifying problematic elements, using them to critique or illustrate problematic societal attitudes and phenomena. In order to engage with media in a moral way, we need to understand what the messages the work is sending to us. For Alchemised, I want to talk about how the book talks about domestic violence, women, and rape. Remember how the author included a note at the beginning that trigger warnings were in the back? Let's take a look at what those trigger warnings said. Alchemised is a work of dark fantasy containing wartime violence, religious abuse, depictions of complex trauma, suicidal ideation, self-harm, human experimentation, medical torture, eugenics, cannibalism, sexual assault, rape, and allusions to necrophilia. Please remember that fiction is not authorial endorsement. The author specifically says that depicting these actions are not authorial endorsement, but I actually would push back against this. I think depicting these actions, of course, does not have to be endorsement. Putting pen to paper, so to speak, does not mean you would ever do these things or want others to do these things. There's plenty of media out there that depicts these same things. Take Room by Emma Donoghue, for example. In this book and later the movie adaptation, a young woman is kidnapped and raped and ends up having a son. Together they escape, showing the trauma that comes from events like these and the adversity needed to escape. In the book The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, as well as the TV show, the women in the society are kept prisoner and raped to produce babies for the wealthy elite who have taken over the country. This work is a complex tale about legally controlling women's reproductive freedom and about religious devotion. Just because these works show rape and awful situations doesn't mean that the works are inherently endorsing this. And we know this as an audience because we get shown how awful it is and how the people oppressed by the system are working on getting themselves or others out of it. The perpetrators of abuse are not glorified and they're not treated as the heroes. I would argue that Alchemised does not do this. When you have your character saying, "We were both raped," and a man continuously telling a woman he owns her, and then you have the couple end up living happily ever after, I unfortunately do not believe you when you say it's not an endorsement of those relationships and behaviors. And listen, before you get on me about how Farron was trapped too, I understand. I read the book. But the difference is, and always will be, that Farron was in a position of power, and he used that power to get what he wanted from Helena. And the book ended up with her falling in love with him after he repeatedly beat her, traumatized her, and assaulted her. And that was all before the Handmaid's Tale arc. So no, I don't give Farron a pass. To be clear, I think that dark content and dark romance has a place in the world. But if you are publishing a work with these themes, you need to have a cohesive message. You you need to be saying something. That something can be as simple as, this isn't good, but everyone in the world seems to think it is. Think The Giver. You need some kind of character or narration to bring that to life. I would argue that Alchemised does not have this. Crowther and Ilva tell Helena that she's becoming too attached to Farron, but it is no way a clear disavowalment of their relationship because Crowther and Ilva wanted the information Farron had. Helena herself had some concerns about Farron, but over time they're just slowly forgotten. Even in the last few chapters when she's confronted again about how Farron has not improved in his retirement, how he still kills people and is vile to others, she defends him. I think the problem comes when you have no message arguing against the depictions. When you have awful things happen and all of your characters are complicit in it, you aren't sending a message. You are endorsing it. And to be clear, it is hard to build up a world and delve deep into these topics. It takes years of writing, of world building. And I think at the core of why it failed in Alchemised is because this book was originally a fanfiction. In fanfiction, you can pull ideas from original works and Frankenstein them together. And your audience will have a clear enough picture of both works and the messages in that work that it makes sense. But if you remove the original works and try to keep the messages they conveyed, you end up with shallow ideas and the messages getting lost. It's like if you're on the ground looking up at a ladder, the ladder leads up to the message that killing people is bad, violence is bad. In an original work with original ideas, the ladder makes sense. It's fully formed. And as the story progresses, you climb to the top of it. Now, if you steal that ladder, some of those rungs might fall off. And suddenly as you're climbing, there's steps missing. And by the time you get to the top, you're not sure if the message at the top makes sense because you missed so much in between. Sure, there was a message, but was it the message the author intended, or was it the message the previous author intended, now corrupted by all the changes? And unfortunately, I feel like the author does this with multiple topics. War, religion, women, pregnancy, rape. Ideas are brought up and then not fully fleshed out. And this book is 1,000 pages. It's like I can see a ghost of a message, the ghost of an idea. But is it Sinlin Yu's idea? Or is it the media the original piece was based off? And I think it's totally fine to not have fleshed out ideas in fan fiction. In free content, I'm not expecting my authors to have incredible works with no plot holes and no confusing messaging. But when you're publishing a book, you have an editor and a $3 million movie deal, I just expect more out of the product I receive. And ultimately, I am not happy with the product I paid for because I don't feel like the author did the legwork of developing the themes that they put in their book. If you want to Frankenstein other works, that's fine. That's what fan fiction is for. But if you're going to make your own original book and claim it is 100% original, scrubbed of all IP, you need to follow through. It has to be clean. It has to have meaning. To me, evil is evil. So when the character ends up with the man who committed evil against her, and we as the audience are supposed to root for this and be happy for this ending, this isn't like a bittersweet ending to me. This isn't the author being derisive and saying the character deserved better. It isn't a commentary on how people stay in abusive relationships. It is quite literally an epilogue ending. We see the credits roll, the sunset ending. And to me, this means the author supports relationships like this. If the author didn't, they wouldn't have ended up together, and the punishment Farron faced would have been comparable to his many crimes. And if you enjoyed this couple, this means you too may support relationships like that. And that's not me making judgments about your morality or ethics. I think normally, if I asked you if a woman should stay with a man who raped her, beat her, verbally abused her, and says he owns her, you would say no, of course not. But for some reason, a lot of people like this kind of relationship when it's in Alchemised. So why is that? All right, I'm about to get really nuanced on you, but I do believe there are scenarios where you can forgive a partner for raping you or committing other crimes. I'll explain. I'm going to walk you through some morality examples. So first off, has anyone here ever read Avengers fanfiction or watched the Avengers movies? The Avengers are all painted as good guys in the media they come from. Sure, some of them are snarky, some of them are boastful, but ultimately they're good and they will do the good thing. So if you pair any of these characters together, they are both good and you establish to the audience they're good. They don't do bad things to each other. So if you incorporate some kind of plot device that makes one character do a bad thing to another, the audience members and the characters in the story can still look at the character and see good, even after the bad thing, assuming it is handled correctly by the narrative. If both characters are good, it is easy enough to reconcile because they are both still good at heart, even if that bad thing happened. A great example of this is Bucky Barnes. He starts off the narrative as good and becomes bad, even beats up Steve Rogers, oh no. But he works hard and he redeems himself, and we see him as good in the end. Okay, so now you're like, well, Tara, not all characters are good. Farron isn't good from the beginning, and I concur. So let's go deeper with the metaphor. Let's say one character is good and one character is bad. So if the bad character does something bad to the good character, the pre-existing relationship both with the audience and with the character is the pivotal point. If the pre-existing relationship is bad, then we probably conceive the character as bad and irredeemable. An example of this would be Thanos. He's largely considered irredeemable, bad, because his actions are on such a scale that he can't really come back from it. Fanfictions will probably try though. Characters will probably denounce the bad character's actions, and it will be a plot device to teach morality. If the pre-existing relationship is good, we probably perceive this character as good at heart and possibly redeemable if they can do enough good to redeem themselves. A good example of this is Loki, who starts off as being a villain and evil, but ends up doing the right thing, even if it is sometimes selfishly motivated. Okay, so let's say that either way, good or bad character, they were forced to do something. That something went past the limit of what the character's internal moral compass of what is bad, but they were forced to do it. Kind of what this book tries to imply happened to Farron. In the media produced, the writers have to decide where the limit is for morality, both for the audience and for the character. What is their final line? This could be killing children, or genocide, or rape. It could be violence in general. When writing a character who is bad, you have to toe the line of what is evil versus not evil, and what is glamorized versus not glamorized by the narrative. But ultimately, the one who decides is the audience. The audience looks at the actions the character commits and decides if it's good or bad, if it went too far. For Loki and Bucky, it didn't go too far. For Thanos, it did. And of course, that isn't true for everyone. Some people might look at the actions of Loki or Bucky and never forgive them. But a good writer will be able to sense both sides and play it out on the page. They will know where the limits are, and if they push past those limits, they will hopefully give the character an arc that redeems them in the audience's eyes as penance. So now, with that discussed, if you found the relationship between Farron and Helena to be forgivable, enjoyable even, knowing everything he did, I have to ask you to look inside yourself. Is the worst thing morally to you not rape? Is it not anything on this list? Is it something worse? Because these are all the crimes I could come up with for Farron, and there is likely some missing. So where is the line for you? Because my line was probably somewhere quite low, like calling women whores and saying you own them. And if you're into men who speak to you like this, maybe your line is murder or rape, or apparently something worse. Maybe those are forgivable to you too. And like I said, I think they could be for me too if there is a proper redemption arc, or if the character has a solid enough base of being good. And do you know how I know this relationship can work? Because Harry Potter is ripe with it. People love redeeming the Death Eaters, and honestly, I won't lie to you, I eat it up. There's a reason that in canon, Severus Snape gets sort of redeemed. It is a compelling narrative. We find out if you can forgive bullying children, his good deeds for the good guys of the story outweigh his bad ones. Draco Malfoy is a twat in the school, a bully, but when it comes time for him to murder someone, he can't even do it. The worst crimes he commits in canon are very minor, so it's easy enough to forgive him. And that is what makes Draco and Hermione's relationship possible in the fanon. You can give him a narrative where he learns he was being awful, and he improves, and he learns, and thus he can reform and become good. But Cain Farron is never established as a good guy. He did kill Apollo Holdfast starting a war. He tortures and he murders people without regard. He demeans and abuses our protagonist. His situation was perhaps predestined for him from his family's relationship with the current political climate. But he did not refuse or fail to commit crimes. His mother may have been tortured, but once she died, he did not put down his weapons and escape. So what is happening when you all look at Farron? Where is the final line? What if Helena had been 15? What if she had been 12? Would that have been the line? His war crime list is already so long, and his crimes just against Helena are long as well. And the problem is, I felt the pull of the book in part 2. I could maybe have been fully bought in, but a rational part of my brain kept reminding me that this is a bad guy, and I don't like him. And he is not given a redemption arc. He is given an obsession over one girl who he controls and manipulates and steals away like a war prize. And the book glorifies this and the suffering she went through without ever doing the work to make us forgive him as a character. Obviously, I'm not saying there's a number of crimes you commit in life before you're unforgivable, but if you're going to put a character on a page who is unequivocally a bad guy, you need to either not endorse his actions on the page in a more solid way, or give him a redemption arc that is actually meaningful. Becoming a spy so that you can control a random girl and end up on top regardless of what side wins the war is not enough. enough, but it appears like the author thought it was. So no, I personally cannot stand behind this book or support the relationship. I think there are ways that it could have worked for me. We were sort of getting there, and then it all fizzled and died. Like I said, I saw in part 2 that I was beginning to like the relationship, but then I would remember the crimes the man committed, and I'd be like, girl, get up! Stop letting him talk to you like this. If Farron was a man lower on the totem pole, who maybe was told to commit one crime and didn't even have the balls, and his most guilty sin was being an asshole, I'd be like, yeah, I get it. I see why that relationship could happen. That's not egregious. And you know who an example of that character is? Draco Malfoy. Canon Draco Malfoy. Draco who couldn't kill Dumbledore. Draco who ran away from the final battle. Draco who is mostly a little baby when Hermione punched him in the face. Like, I get why Hermione and Draco are popular. And if you've read 400 fanfictions with them, I can get how your brain would get a little clogged with the little silver-haired boy, and you forget that when you make him a murderer and a rapist, not everyone is going to like it the same way they like Draco and Fannin. As someone who is not obsessed with this specific pair, this didn't work for me. And honestly, I think it means that it will not work for the mass market. Luckily for Sinlin Yu, I think by making the book so long, they purposely made their audience mostly fanfiction readers. But that's going to have a cap. The more people you have reading this book who have not read the fanfiction, the worse the reviews are going to get. I can almost guarantee it. I think this book will either become a cult classic, and there will basically be a little hand guide on how to read the magic system in this book, or we're going to see that over time the ratings will drop as this gets into the hands of a wider audience, and they go, what the fuck did I just read? Or they give up in part 1. You're gonna get people who read books of all kinds and pick up this book that seems big, seems to be heavier themes, and they're going to realize that the author is making abusive relationships, making manipulation, and ending up with your abuser be glorified. If you think the vitriol that happened with It Ends With Us is anything compared to what could happen here, listen, I'm happy that a queer person got their bag and that Sinlin Yu has a $3 million movie deal, but I don't think this movie is possible unless they remove the rape scenes. I don't think people want to watch a pregnant rape movie in theaters. I'm sorry, but I don't want to watch that with my mom. I don't want to watch that with my sister. That makes me uncomfortable. I maybe will stream it 6 months from now in the privacy of my own home, but I'm not watching that in the theater, and I don't think we'll have 50 Shades of Grey lines. I, like many others, had to stop watching The Handmaid's Tale for a while because it was literally freaking me out. I'm not too interested in seeing the same thing play out on the big screen. If they do make this movie, I think they'd have to completely change the tone and make Farron a likable person. Because again, if you show him murdering people and then raping a woman, your audience might walk out of the theater. They're gonna tell their grandma not to see it, but if it's a little scandalous, just a bad boy who makes comments and maybe he chokes her a little, but then immediately regrets it, that's a different story. I do think doing this in chronological order and toning down Farron could work. And I honestly don't get why this book wasn't further edited with this in mind. I'm just baffled because it didn't have to be like this. Unless of course the publisher demanded that the book be almost identical to Manacled, which is possible. I think that the idea of a bad character does bad things and then we learn good things about the character and we change our opinions and have to grapple with how we feel about character now is what the author wanted to do. But they completely failed because they just made Farron too bad. And then they tried to convince us he's good without doing the legwork or having the character commit himself to it. He gets a happy ending. He murders someone again pages before the book ends. I feel like a book that handles this nuance really well is Notes on an Execution. The book is clearly saying that like this guy is bad, he murdered people, but his life was crazy and tragic. And as people observe that life, they can see how all those circumstances made him the way that he is. You can see how he made the mistakes, the crimes that he did, and made the final punishment he gets make more sense. But you could still be sad and you could still feel for him and you could feel for his victims and you can feel for all the problems that people like him in society create. And you can have that nuance to look at. You can be like, this man can love people, this man can be loved by people and still be a bad person and deserve punishment. But Alchemised doesn't want to do any of that critical thinking because it's a beloved fanfiction couple. And what people want is for them to end up together at the end. You can do this in a fanfiction because you already like these people and you know it's not real. You know it's not the real canon story. It's a side quest. It's an exploration. So you can always go back and be like, wow, that was crazy. But then you read it enough times and you slowly lose the deeper parts and it just becomes, I love it. And you're not able to think critically. Okay, you love it, but can you also acknowledge its problems? Can you acknowledge where it fails to make social commentary? Can you acknowledge the things that you are exposed to as you're reading and then what that might slowly indoctrinate you to? Just because something's depicted in a novel doesn't mean it's endorsed, sure. But as I said before, you need to show me you don't endorse it. I think it is dangerous to include a forced pregnancy and forced sterilization / anti-sterilization arc in your book. Having a forced anti-birth control narrative in your work when in our current day and age, Roe v. Wade has been overturned and people with uteruses face so many challenges getting access to healthcare. And yet what this book says about that is that actually forcing anti-birth control is kind of chill. Actually, pregnancy is kind of okay. Actually, we should probably be having babies. You'll change your mind. Actually, if a man's kind of manipulating you and keeps you captive, that's kind of chill. It's kind of hot. It's okay because he's also a victim. Like, huh? He can be a victim and we can also hold people accountable for what happened. We can hold him accountable in some ways and we can hold the people in power above him accountable. But ultimately, he did have choices and the choices he made were hurtful given the circumstances of the characters. Additionally, this book talks a lot about women and how they're less than men. This is one place where I could more clearly see what the author was trying to say, which was that this message was wrong. But still, I felt like the follow through on that was lacking. Lila was one of the only guardians or Palladians for Luke, and we get the message that she was overcoming adversity by being in this position. But then she gets impregnated and quietly stops fighting. She does go back and get her revenge in the end, but I think this arc is weak. Most women in the story are treated so badly by the narrative. Ivy commits crimes for revenge and then changes her mind when she learns Helena is pregnant. Ilva commits crimes for the greater good. Rhea is a loving mother, but ultimately dies a cruel and unforgiving death at the hands of her own husband. Enid gets tortured for her husband and son's failure. Even Aurelia, who is cruel and vicious in her own way, gets killed at the hands of a man. It's like if you're going to beat down any and all women characters, what does that say? If you're going to add multiple lines about how women are worthless in society and not push back very hard on that notion, what does that say? Hi, Editor Tara here. I just want to say I feel like I was a little harsh, so I'm gonna kind of tone down now. I've had some time to think about this, and I want to be very clear that if you like this book, all the power to you. Like, no hate. I understand liking it. Like I said, I was into it in part 2. I was getting it. I just think that my point was that there are a lot of things this book does kind of ungracefully, and ultimately, I think it could have been handled better. I think that the themes that they were trying to get at were important and could have said something, and they didn't. And so that the messaging got kind of muddled. But again, if you like the book, if you disagree with me, that's fine too. I really had a problem with it for these like rape and women aspects. And perhaps I'm reading too much into it, but I really don't think so. I really think that my points are important, and that we should all be a little more aware of what we're consuming and what it says. But again, I don't want to offend anyone if you enjoyed this. That's not the point of this. It's just that like we can hold both in our hands. We can enjoy it and then also recognize the problems that it's possibly perpetuating. So anyways, I'm getting angry, so let's move on. Questionable content aside, this book also struggled with some writing aspects. None of these are very egregious. I largely found this book to be very readable, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to mention them. Characters who weren't Farron or Helena were largely static, or they had cartoonishly ridiculous betrayals or changes in decisions. The author gives so few descriptions for characters, making them frankly unrecognizable from each other. It means that when we meet a new character, we don't learn anything about what they look like. And as the reader, we're kind of left to assume that they don't matter. They're not even important enough to tell us what color their hair or eyes or skin is. I actually don't even think this was the author's intention. I think I have a suspicion of what might have happened here. I think the author never had to write descriptions for these characters when writing fan fiction because everyone knew who they were. You can find a photo online. You can look at fan art. You can look at the actor. You don't really need to describe it. People even know who side characters are in beloved works, and if you're converting your fan fiction into a book, those same loyal people still know who the characters are. But if you don't know, like me, it makes the reading experience poor, and I quite frankly find it lazy. If the author had included descriptions that were exactly the same as the original source material, they would be accused of cheating and copying further. But if they don't include any, it gets confusing. And if they do include descriptions but somehow change it, the people who are reading it, who have a preconceived notion of who these characters are, suddenly will find the descriptions don't match up with what's in their head, and it might upset them. And you wouldn't want that. You wouldn't want to upset the loyal audience. And in some ways, you probably don't even want to upset your own brain, because in your head, these characters are probably still the same. Otherwise, you probably would have told me what color their hair was. And I can say all this with confidence, because even if I didn't know this book was a Harry Potter fan fiction, reading it was so reminiscent of Harry Potter plot points that there's no way I wouldn't read this and be like, this really reminds me of this thing in Harry Potter. It wouldn't be hard to see the kind of shadow of what it's inspired by. And I pointed some of them out in my walkthrough, but some other big ones I noticed were the mind reading, how similar it was to legitimacy and occlumency. There was also that one line about Helena and Luke traveling together in chapter 27, which makes no sense in this book, but does in Harry Potter. Same with The Handmaid's Tale. It's like, why did the cloak have to be red? Why was it like that? Why do we even have a forced breeding thing? The whole baby being for the High Necromancer, like, we could have changed it. We could have done anything. It could have been Helena's blood. Like, there could have been so many options, but no, we have to keep the core point of the Handmaid's Tale elements. There was also some lack of editing or inconsistencies that I noticed, which I found strange because this book was published by well-known publishing houses and it had editors. Some examples are that in chapter 2, when Helena still has her memory blocked, she says the only time she'd ever seen the High Necromancer, Moro, he killed Luke. But when she erases her memory, it's all of the past 2 years, which should include that event too. In chapter 24, we learned that the Resistance has figured out the Undying, but why is it that 3/4 years later, it's a shock when one of the Undying are killed? I can understand Helena not knowing Obsidian kills them. That might have been in the block timeline, but this shouldn't have been. Perhaps it's on me. Perhaps if I take the magnifying glass and look at the timeline, I'll find I'm wrong. But as a reader, this literally making me go, huh? When Helena wakes up in part 3, chapter 66, she says about Farron, he was different, older. He wasn't old, but his eyes had a look as if it had been decades since she last seen him. But he's still 16 and immortal at this point. Like, maybe stress aged him, but like, say that. All these little things add up to confusion as a reader. The timeline was messy. The way the book would say the chapter takes place in June and then it would be January the next chapter. I've reread so much of this book by now, and I'm still confused on Helena's age in the timeline. At one point, it says she was at the hospital for 6 years, but she also had 2 gap years and 5 years at school and some time in the stasis tank. Again, I think this is a consequence of taking an existing timeline and adapting it to a quote-unquote original one. A lot of little things in this book were messy. The book also had this tendency to do this thing where it'd be like, they talk, he leaves, she finds something else to do, he comes back, they talk again. And it was a confusing thing to me, and it probably sounded confusing when I was giving you the whole book rundown. But the problem is that's genuinely how it's presented. Like, we will like stop a conversation and then come back to it like 2 pages later just so we can add a little tidbit of information in between. And it like doesn't really make sense. And an editor should have caught how rampant it is in the book and probably cut it down. Like, you could have just like changed the scenes around and like made everything happen at once and then made that other scene happen at a different time. Like, it wasn't that different. And boy, oh boy, can we talk about the anachronisms? Send the News still has their Pinterest as public, and you're telling me we're looking at these photos, this is the vibe, and then we're also having these items in the narrative? An ambulance, a car, IV lines and feeding tubes and radios. Every time one of these was mentioned, I was taken out of my magical alchemy world and I was like, huh? And none of these items were that important is the crazy thing. All of these could have had made up magical counterparts, but no, instead we got lazy holdovers from the Harry Potter fanfiction where all of these items made sense because it was Britain in the 1990s and not a country that's only 500 years old. So yeah, I did not enjoy Alchemised, and I think it was a failure in a lot of ways. And maybe I'm a giant hypocrite because maybe if fan fictions from my favorite fandoms got traditionally published, I might unabashedly love them. But I like to think that I would still consider them critically and still think about what they have to say. And I think what Alchemised had to say borders on dangerous and definitely isn't something I want to support morally. I don't think it shouldn't have been written, don't get me wrong, but I do think we should all be having deeper conversation, not just about this book, but all of the media we consume. My name is Tara Mulcoyd, and if you watch this whole video, don't forget to like and subscribe. I normally make videos about Minecraft and occasionally fan fiction, but this channel is for me to say what I want, and sometimes that's about books. If you're interested in books I have enjoyed, I recommend checking out this video about my favorite books and my favorite fanfic. I hope to see you in the next video, and I hope you all have a fantastic day. Bye!